Well, hello. Yeah, it's me. It's me. I'm not doing any more shows. Like I said, this is not a show. It's not a show. Don't think about it. There's no introduction here. There's no welcome to whatever that show was. It doesn't exist. It's just me. It's just guy talking to myself. Teddy will show up at some point, but not to throw a guest under the bus, but she's late, and my time is valuable. So I'm going to talk for a few minutes in this mic. If she doesn't show up in about 15 minutes, it's off altogether. But otherwise, I'll just take this opportunity to make some opening comments. So I actually had to decide for a long time on how I was going to be for this particular conversation. Would I be rude and off the chain, or would I be civil? And in the 11th hour, I decided to be civil. So I'm going to try to be civil, although one of the things I hate is tardiness. So my civility is already slipping for a conversation that I didn't want to have in the first place. And what is this conversation? Well, this is a conversation where that Teddy has been asking for a while, where she gets to grill me about my leaving the faith, as it were. And the reason I find this conversation utterly, excuse me, utterly fruitless. Actually, a few reasons. One, I've already given the reasons many times. Many times. There's no one listening to the sound of my voice right now who hasn't heard me give some part of the reason. Before I started that show that has now ended, I had a blog called Beyond Religion. Excuse me, Beyond Religion. I got a comment on that blog. I want to say just last night. Last night. I haven't done that blog in years, and yet I still get comments on different articles I wrote. So I've been giving reasons for why I left the faith for over a decade. So this conversation that Teddy wants to have is not because I haven't been upfront or because I've been guarded in some way about why I walked away from the faith. That's just not the case. It's also not because Teddy hasn't heard, because Teddy has heard. We've talked about it on air, off air. We've talked about it a lot. We've talked about it on the show, which will not be named because it doesn't exist anymore. Um, we've So it's not that Teddy doesn't know either. Please turn off your camera, Teddy. This will not be a video podcast. Thank you. Um, and so that's one of the reasons why I feel like this conversation is fruitless, because it's been done many times. The second reason, though, that I think this conversation is fruitless and borderline offensive is because I question Teddy's motives. She will get to speak in a moment to give her motives, but I actually question Teddy's motives, not because I think Teddy's an evil person. I don't think she's an evil person. She's just a Christian caught up in a somewhat evil bubble that Christians are in, and they have a hard time thinking their way out of it. Which is to say, they simply must discredit non-believers who walk away from the faith. Now, non-believers like Darren, he's never been in the faith. He doesn't actually need to be discredited. Christians don't really care about people like Darren that much. People like me are a real sore spot for them because I was there. And I wasn't just there. I was at the top of the food chain. If I can walk away, and I was far more involved than the average Christian, then what might the average Christian be missing? What might they not know? This is a very dangerous situation for the Christians. And so whenever someone prominent walks away from the faith, Christians have to quickly scurry around and try to put it into context and discredit the Christian, either as someone who never was a Christian in the first place, or who was a Christian but had really insufficient reasons for leaving, and that's the only reason for this kind of conversation, I believe. And so I find it borderline offensive, a waste of time, and it's going to be very hard for me to keep my promise to myself of being completely civil throughout this process. So, at any rate, Teddi has arrived. Teddi, there's really no opening statement. I was filling time because you weren't here, and my time is valuable. I'll just keep saying that because it's a work day for me. So glad to see you. How you doing?
Doing well, doing well.
Good.
Well, so I didn't hear the beginning of what you were saying.
You heard enough.
I had people in the house that I was having to try to get out. Anyway, so I sense a note of hostility there.
It's not a note, it's a whole chorus.
A whole
it's a freaking
chorus.
Orchestra.
Okay, then an orchestra of hostility. And that is, that's not what this discussion is about. It's about two friends who have discussed Christianity. And I feel like we dance around a lot of things. And this is a discussion that I actually wanted to have with you. Just from early on, probably within the first couple of exchanges that we've had. And I think it's an important one to have, to understand exactly what happened. What in the hell happened?
Okay, but you do understand, Teddi, that I've been over this ad nauseum many times on air, off air, with you, with others.
No,
in print,
not with me. Not with
print,
me.
but do you think the answers are different with you?
Well, I mean, I might be asking some questions that are different from what you've been asked, and I might pose some challenges to you that are hard to, when you're just commenting back and forth. So
what
there
kind of challenges? What do you expect? What is your goal? What are you going to get out of this, Teddi?
My goal is for you to come back to your faith.
Okay, we could stop now.
No. Okay, so then this is invincible ignorance. Okay, if you will not listen to anything that I have to say, and I must say,
I don't have to listen to anything that you have to say. I have made a decision that is based on my best assessment, and I don't have to submit myself to your sales tactic to get me to re-sign up for
wise
AOL. I'm sorry,
people.
I'm out of AOL. It's done. You can't.
Well, you know what? Let
me
me tell you something, David. Wise people never stop assessing and reassessing. And I must say that I was going to give a compliment, but now I'm not. Excellent. Because it seems to not apply, but maybe it does because you're still willing to have a dialogue. But I have another friend, and as we're having a very heated disagreement about certain tenets of Christianity, the friend wants to just shut down the dialogue, and because of it's too much of a hot topic. But you know what?
People have a right not to talk about this shit.
People do. But do we respect that? Do we respect?
Yeah, well, you should. That? You have a right to talk about or not talk about whatever you want.
Yeah, you have a right to, but one of the things that I really appreciate about a lot of the members of Skeptics and Seekers, and you
mean the show that will not be named?
Yeah, okay, well, I didn't catch that part. All right. Well, my point is, and you know what? It should be named. It was a great show. It should be named. Anyway, one of the things that I really valued and treasured truly is that as irate as we might get, as fiery as the dialogue might get, we all
Did you say
kept coming back.
fiery? Fiery?
Fiery,
As in
fiery.
as in people are fired up? Fired up?
Oh,
Are they?
don't
Anyway,
make
go
me say
ahead.
those
No,
initials.
we
Don't
don't
make
have
me
to
say
dwell on
those
that.
initials on this show. Um, well, we like the fire. Well, yeah. There's so many puns there. I just, but anyway, as I was saying, conversation is a blood sport for us, but beyond that, there's an intellectual aspect to it, and that is the search for truth, the digging, the trying to figure out what is true. And for the people that take their ball and go home, that evidences a lack of interest in seeking the truth.
Bullshit.
Because no, it's not bullshit. And the thing is that but on skeptics and seekers, and yes, I am naming it because it deserves to be named. The thing that was valued is that we could, and I really don't think that we ever insult each other for the purpose of insulting, but you know what, the truth can be hard to hear. The truth can be very hard to hear, and sometimes the truth can sound hateful, even though it is being given out of a sense of love for one's fellow man. And if you care about people, and if you care about truth, then the dialogue cannot stop. It can. People can choose.
Yes, it can, and yes, you can. Look, I don't. You don't have to be.
Can.
You don't have to be evangelistic about this stuff. My search for truth may look different from your search for truth, and you actually have no way or right to judge my search based on your standards or your criteria. So I don't give a good goddamn if you consider me a real seeker or not. I
I
am.
got a right to judge anything I want to judge.
Well, fine, but I have a right to not care about it.
You
So
do.
if you want to say that I don't search for truth, or I don't care about truth because I don't continue in a conversation that you find interesting, that's on you. That's an illegitimate criteria for truth seeking.
But you are having the conversation. So I'm not saying that about you, because you have made yourself willing to have that conversation.
I
So
did I did a show. No one is bound to make themselves open or available to that conversation. In
I
fact,
agree.
the answer when a Christian asks a skeptic why you left the faith, the best answer that should be given is none of your damn business. Leave me the fuck alone.
Okay, then we have a right to
That
then
is the
judge you
best
as an
answer.
idiot. Then you know what? We have a right to judge you as an idiot because you
I don't
spent,
care if you judge me
I
as
will
an
tell
idiot.
you. Okay, but here's the thing. You spent a lot of time devoted to a certain idea, to certain thoughts. You spent a lot of your time devoted to that. And to just upend that means that either you were not very thoughtful about what you were doing and devoting your life to beforehand or after. It's one or the other, because either you were misguided in the beginning for all those years, which that's possible, or you are misguided now. So truth
Again,
there's only
neither
one
side of
truth.
that is subject to your judgment, or at least not subject to my caring about your judgment about it. So you can say that I'm misguided now, or you can say that I was misguided then. I don't care.
You could, but my point is that do you value truth, David? Or are you one of those believers, there is no truth?
I don't hold my value of truth up to your scrutiny. So once again, I don't care if you think I'm a real seeker or not. Don't give a damn.
I
And
didn't even use the term seeker.
you are diminished if you think that you can pass that kind of judgment.
I didn't even use the term seeker. I'm just talking about
Well,
either you
it's a
write
common
all those
term
years.
in our community. I was just
I
trying to
know
use
that
something
is, but
familiar.
that's not my term, and I didn't use it.
Very
And
well.
you
I will not pepper you with that term then.
and
I
I
withdraw
do.
the term.
Okay.
None of us are real seekers here.
Okay. But
We repudiate the idea of real seeker. I just want
oh,
that on record.
now. So, but back to what we're saying, as you know from prior conversations, I believe there is something that is the truth. And yes, people talk about, oh, my personal truth and all that. Well, for example, if somebody steals your pen, there is a certain fact about that, a certain truth about what happened. Now, other people's perspective might be, well, well, she just borrowed the pen, or she just, motives might be hidden. But if there is a God that can understand what people's motives are, then that further tells you that even with things that go on in the mind, there is a truth in terms of what occurs. Now, there's also such a thing as perspective, and a lot of times people, their perspective can be off. For example, I see that frequently with a lot of friends of mine, where they might interpret a particular behavior as sexist, because a man has done something negative to a woman. Perhaps they disagreed with their politics, but instead of seeing the truth that it's just a disagreement about politics, they interpret it as something that is their sacred cow. Like, oh, he just doesn't agree with me
I
because
have
I'm
no
a
idea what
woman.
you're talking about.
I'm
Come to the
talking
point.
about misunderstandings and perceptions being wrong, and how sometimes people are so sensitive to certain things to where they cannot back off and look at
What
things
does it matter to you
much
if I'm wrong about a
objectivity.
God?
I'll tell you what it matters to me, David. I consider you a dear friend. And so
So
what happens to you afterwards, after you die, concerns me. So
then
that's what this
you
is
have a
all about.
mental illness if you're sitting
No, this
around
is not a
concerned
mental
about what
illness.
happens after I die.
No, this is not a mental illness. Do you know what happens after death?
I
No,
don't care.
but you should. And so
No, no, you
sometimes
can't tell me what I should care about. I
I can't
don't
tell you,
care.
I can tell you what
Okay.
you should care
I
about. I
don't
can't
have to
make you care
care. It
about it.
just sounds
You
like the
don't have
ravings
to
of a
care.
lunatic to me.
I cannot force you to care,
Tell me,
but
do you know what happens after you die?
I cannot say with
Okay, so
100%
you don't know what happens after you
certainty.
die, but
But
you're definitely
evidence.
concerned about what happens to me after I die.
I have
This sounds like
evidence
a mental
beyond.
illness.
No, I have evidence beyond reasonable doubt of what happens after we die.
You do?
And in terms of the precise
Wait,
nature of
go back to
hell,
that. This is news. You have evidence beyond a reasonable doubt of what happens after we die.
yes,
I want to hear
to a
that,
certain extent, sure, I will be happy
but
to.
not a certain extent. I want to hear that
I
same
didn't.
confidence.
Well, I'm telling you with confidence. I am
Okay, so
confident that life.
what is the evidence of what happens after we die?
Well, that is a whole other show, as we've
Why
talked
is
about
that such
with
a
the
hard
Shroud
question?
of Turin.
You have
Okay,
evidence
I'm
beyond a
giving you
reasonable
the
doubt.
answer. I'm giving you the answer, David.
Mhm.
What I am certain of is that life does not stop after death here
Okay,
on earth.
why do you believe that in
Okay, and
brief?
I believe that
Take a good 30
because of
seconds.
the Bible and how the Shroud
Bible's
of Turin
bullshit, whatever.
emerges. No,
The
it is
Shroud
not
doesn't tell
bullshit.
you anything about what happens after you die.
You're claiming that it is bullshit does not make it so.
Okay, and
And
you're
you
claiming
know,
that it's not doesn't make it not
I am,
so.
but there is a lot of internal consistency, and then you
There's a lot of
add.
internal consistency in Mein Kampf.
Okay,
I
no,
don't know
there
what your
is.
point is.
Okay, I'm talking about internal consistency from different sources and historical evidence that merges with that.
There are lots of
And
internal
then you throw
consistency and
in,
historical
and then
evidence
you
with the
throw,
Unabomber Manifesto. He was
no, there
right
is
about
not.
a
And then
lot
you,
of things.
not in that, he was one man writing. You didn't have the writings of multiple people, secular and
Well, there are
non-secular.
lots of historians that would attest to many facts that he would have alluded to.
Okay, but those were not facts that were pertinent to anything in
And
terms of what he was saying was true. He was issuing an opinion and a kookadoo manifesto. Okay, that is not the
okay,
same.
a man wandering
level
around the
as
desert
this.
hearing God tell him to make sure that everyone 8 days old in this region gets their foreskin off their penis chopped off. Now,
There
that's
were
not
certain,
wackadoo. That's not
there were
wackadoo at all.
certain, there were
I'll
certain
take the Unabomber
requirements.
Manifesto any day.
Okay, well, you're just trying to totally switch what we're talking about.
I don't know
We're
what you're
talking
talking
about
about.
internal
You've got
consistency
some
and
evidence.
external
Some
consistency.
you've got
There's
some
lots of
beyond the reasonable
evidence.
doubt
There are
evidence.
biblical scholars that talk about, and the fact that something has been repeated and carried on through an oral tradition and then a
Uh-huh.
written tradition. But we're getting off topic.
What is the topic again?
The main, okay, I mean, what we were initially getting, which was still off topic, was what happens after we die. And
Right. And
I
so I
think
was waiting for
there
you to tell me what happens after we die.
I think that there is evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that life goes on. It's a question of where
Okay,
you will
you said
spend
the
the
Bible, I
remainder of
reject that, and you said the Shroud of Turin, I reject that. Even if the Shroud of Turin is exactly what you say it is, proof that one man rose from the dead, that does not tell us, generally speaking, what happens to everybody after they die. It does not. It's a one
it
time,
doesn't.
even by your own admission, a one time event,
Oh, no,
not
no, no.
repeatable.
Okay. Yeah, it's not repeatable because it
Very
was a
well. So it
miracle.
doesn't tell
Because
us
it was
what
a
happens after we
miracle.
die.
And there is only one redeemer. There is only one redeemer. And that miracle was made to evidence and point to that this was the redeemer. This is the
Right. This is the
only
Redeemer.
redeemer of
Fantastic. That
humanity.
doesn't tell us what happens after we die.
It does. Because if
Well,
that,
help me
okay, here's
understand what
why.
happens after we die.
Because David, if the shroud, let's just, okay, it sounded like you were willing to, for the purposes of this discussion,
For this
accept my
ridiculous
premise.
discussion,
No, it
yes.
is not a ridiculous discussion. If we accept the premise that the Shroud of Turin is the authentic burial cloth of Christ,
And why
and
wouldn't
that
we?
it evidences the resurrection, that when you put that evidence with historical evidence in terms of the Bible
Mhm.
and in terms of historians, all of that point to the information in the Bible being true. And and then you got to throw in Pascal's wager, which we live
Oh,
our lives
God.
according to risk. And we must decide, what are we willing to risk for certain things, a cost benefit analysis. Okay. And so when we do this when we step outside. I mean, in Chicago, people walk out the door and they're taking a major risk on whether they're going to get hit by a stray bullet. They can get hit by a stray bullet while in their own homes. So, there are different risks according to different situations. But when it comes to an extremely massive detrimental thing that would happen to somebody, such as hell. Now, I will agree with you, because I know you're going to say this, that we don't know for sure. It's unclear precisely what hell is.
You
Is
don't
it
really
a
need
lake
me
of
here for this
fire?
conversation at all.
Is it the lake of fire? Well, but you know what? The issue of hell is extremely pertinent to this conversation.
Why?
Because that is what, David, that is what I, in earnest, seek for all of my friends to avoid.
Okay, well, look, I'm sorry that you are troubled by this.
I am
When I call it
troubled
mental
by
illness,
this.
Teddy, I don't mean to be cruel by it.
It isn't a mental illness.
It
If
is
I see someone
if you were
dying,
sitting around aggrieved for an imaginary danger that you don't
prove
even know
it's
for sure,
imaginary.
that you
You
don't
have no
even
proof that it's
even in
imaginary.
your worldview you don't know it's true, and yet you are grieved to the point of pain of what might happen to your friends who don't believe in this fantasy to the degree that you do. I'm sorry.
It's not a fantasy,
That
David.
is
You're saying it does not make it so. And
you're
there
saying it
is a
doesn't make it
tremendous
so.
risk. There is a tremendous risk
No.
in whether the language describing hell, whether it is real or whether it is not. If I knew, for example, that the
You believe it is a risk,
concept
but you
of
also
hell only lasting for a short time,
excuse me.
or that or that upon death, I will tell you, if it were a question
You don't even
of,
know what hell is.
we
You,
don't know for sure, but we
once
know
again, even
either
in
it
your
is
worldview, I don't
figurative,
believe in it at all. But even
it
in
is
your
either,
worldview, in your belief system, you don't even know what it is that you're
I
afraid
know
of.
that it is bad, because if
You're just
Christ,
afraid of some nameless,
if
faceless
Jesus,
bad.
if Jesus Christ and other places in the Bible are using such strong language, that is an obvious warning that this is something that we desperately want to avoid. Okay, so whether it is conscious eternal torment in a lake of fire, or whether that's figurative language, it is bad. Now, if it were just a question of atheists upon their death, they would just no longer exist, then that would be far less troubling to me. Then I'd be like, okay, you don't want eternal life, cut your own throat.
Okay,
But it's not.
the
Life
smartest
is
person I
eternal. It's
know
just
on the
where it
subject of
is.
hell is Chris Date. I have no problem saying that. I disagree with Chris Date about just about everything, but I still think he is probably the smartest and most well-studied person on this position that I have ever listened to or had a conversation with. And I've had a lengthy conversation with him about this stuff, and he doesn't agree with you. And let me just tell you, Teddy, once
In terms
again,
of the
not trying to be
eternality,
mean, you are not the smartest person I've ever talked to on this subject. You do not know half the theology of hell that Chris Date knows, or even that I know. And so there's no reason that I should listen to your fears
there could just
when I've
is,
got people who are far more expert telling me a different
if
story.
I recall correctly, I think I listened to that particular podcast, and I think that he was saying he agreed, I think perhaps with the notion that it's not eternal. But
No. You've misapprehended completely. So let me just give you Chris Date's position in a nutshell.
okay,
He
please.
is an annihilationist. He does not believe.
Yeah, like Titus. That's what I mean. It's
He
not eternal.
no. It's not. It's not just that it's not eternal. He believes that when you die, uh, that that death is the end. That we are annihilated completely. Now there might be some there are two different kinds of annihilationists. So
Because I thought
let me backtrack.
Titus was saying that it wasn't eternal, but that it's not just a quick death and you get to bypass it.
Okay, I'm not sure. Are you by Titus? Are you referring to the guy that I've podcasted with once, who used to
Yeah,
podcast with
yes,
Dave
because
Russell?
he,
Yeah.
when you
So
first interviewed him,
I'm
y'all were
talking about
talking
Chris
about
Date,
that.
and I want to just backtrack a little bit so that I don't misrepresent his position. I want to let people know there are two different kinds of annihilationism. So there's the kind of annihilationism that says when you die, you're dead and nothing else happens. Your annihilation happens here on Earth. And there's another kind of annihilationism that says you are resurrected but then you are killed after resurrection as a punishment, kind of like capital punishment. So you get raised up again to be killed again. I can tell you that among annihilationists, the dying here on Earth once is the one that makes the most sense. And I believe that most annihilationists, once again, I
Why would
say
that
this
make
hesitantly,
sense?
excuse me, theologically speaking, I'm not going to have a theological conversation with you, Teddy, because you're not equipped. But theologically speaking, it
Because
does make
I'm not equipped. I've got a
no.
brain where I can think.
So
Yeah, I can tell you that logically it
the
would make more sense that, and it's not really logic, but just in terms of consistency, it would make more sense that God would resurrect the person to let them know you messed up,
and
you chose
and
wrong. Now you
and
get
so once
punishment.
again,
Why
as
would
I
he
was about
want?
to
Why
say,
would
I'm
God?
pretty sure that most Christians believe that most annihilationists believe that only the righteous are raised, not the unrighteous.
Why
Uh,
would God not
so
want to let the people who rejected him? Why would God
Well,
not want to let them
that's a
know
particular kind
you
of view
made
of
your
God, Teddy.
choice and you chose
That's the kind of
wrong?
God who's just vindictive, who says,
God is
"Yeah,
wrathful.
your death is not enough. I've got to raise you and
God,
and really stick it in your face. You
God is
messed up,
loving.
fella. You get
God is
so
loving, but
you're not going to
God is
escape just by
wrathful.
dying. I want to raise you up and tell you that you've died. Neener,
God,
neener, neener." That's
God is loving, but a lot of people nowadays have such a hard time with the wrath. And that's because we become such a soft society where everything has to be all touchy-feely and, oh, we can't use certain words that are just normal words that we've always used, and nobody has ever taken anything bad to be meant by that. And we become so overly
Hey Teddy,
sensitive to where we've
Do you have
lost
your
the
chat
sight of
open?
truth.
Do you have
The
your chat
what?
open, Teddy?
Hold on.
Go ahead
No,
and open a chat window so that you can see Darren's
no,
comment,
that is not
which
a
says that
truly,
it
as
is only
Darren was
logical.
saying.
Yeah, it is only
Yeah,
logical result of a truly evil and petty God. Look, I'm
no,
not going to call
no.
out and read out these chats. We're just a couple of friends
That's
talking here.
not evil to give somebody enough evidence to give them the world. And then if they spit in your face to let them know that, I've given you all of these chances, all of these opportunities to come to
Uh-huh.
me.
Uh-huh. And so God
Lord
is going to
God
be
loves
so
us.
aggrieved that he's going to want to raise us up just to let us know you messed up, fella.
That is, God is a just God.
Well,
And
wait a minute.
that's
So
justice.
explain the justice again. So he
God
raises
is
you
a
up
just God. And
to
when
kill you
somebody,
again.
now let me tell you something, David. When somebody is
What is
kind to
so
you,
how does the second killing happen? So
let
let's
me
say you
tell you,
died in a
when
house fire,
David,
but then God raises you up and puts you back together long enough to let you know what a mistake you made. Does he burn you again? Is it a hanging, maybe an electric chair,
look,
beheading? What is
David,
the second
there
death
is
like?
something particularly disgusting about people who are ingrates. To be ungracious when somebody offers you
Nobody's
the
offered me
world.
anything, Teddy.
Yes, and you claim for 40 years you were a Christian. Let's get back to the topic because we're dancing around this, and I've been dancing around this issue for the whole
We're mighty
time that
fine
I've been
dancers,
part of
Teddy.
Skeptics and Seekers. And see, I mentioned it again. So let's get back down to it. You have told me, and I believe it was in the comments section back early on when I first got to know all of y'all, that for 40 years you were a believer and you were a Christian and you've held all of these positions of importance in the church and leadership roles and all of that. And all I can say is that it is not a sound mind for someone to go from 40 years of being a really believing Christian and then all of a sudden to change. Now, I know you well enough, David, I know that you do have a sound mind, well, most of the time. And so what that tells me is I use my mind to figure things out. That tells me that these 40 years of Christianity, baloney. It's not been 40 years of Christianity. There has been doubt brewing in your mind for who knows how long. And maybe that doubt, and especially you're being a preacher's kid, maybe that doubt was always there and you just had internal pressure. So let's get back to the real purpose of this conversation, which is to figure out what in the
Actually, I
hell
can't let you
went
advance even
wrong.
further than that. So, 40 years of Christianity bullshit to you. And so the reason you think so is because I must have harbored doubt during that time. So tell me, um, are you
You don't
suggesting,
go.
are you suggesting that if a Christian has doubts, then they're not Christians anymore?
No, I'm not suggesting
Oh,
that.
good,
Even
because what you
even the
just said would
Pope,
lead to that
even the
conclusion.
Pope and Mother Teresa have had
Okay,
doubt.
so then
We
when
all
you're
have
calling my
doubt
40
because
years
we
of
are
Christianity
human.
bullshit, then you must be
I am
talking
calling
bullshit.
it, I am calling
Okay,
it
then
that
what is
because
my doubts as a Christian have to do with whether I was sincerely a
because
Christian or
your
not?
doubts caused you, they were of such magnitude that they caused you to leave the faith.
Oh,
Most
so if a
Christians,
person has serious doubts, then they're not a Christian. Is that what you're saying? So if their doubts really aren't serious,
let me tell you
then it's
something.
okay.
Mother
But if it is,
Teresa,
why don't you answer the question? Because
I am
you've
answering the
accused
question.
me of something grave that I have no patience for. And if you want me to attempt to maintain civility, you're going to have to address that. If you want to suggest that my 40 years in the church was false somehow, you're going to have to back that up, because you just suggested that because I had doubts that I wasn't a real Christian. That's going to let out all kinds of people who claim to have had serious doubts, like Gary Habermas,
No,
uh, Dale, Sean McDowell, the list can,
and
Justin
those
Brierly, the list can
people
go on.
came back, and those people came
Okay,
back.
so if they came back, then they were always a Christian. But if they didn't come back, they were never a Christian?
No, the
How does
question
this work in your mind?
let me tell you, David, you, first of all, I say that a lot of what you say is just, it's not in earnest. And I'm not saying that you were trying to be deceitful. What I am saying is
What does
you
not in earnest mean?
God. You
What?
hate God. That is what this is about.
Okay, now
You
I hate
hate
God.
God.
Okay,
You know
let
he
me wait a minute. Hang on,
this.
hang on. I'm confused by this again. So let me see if I can get this straight. Do I believe in God or not?
You hate
Do I
God.
believe in
And let me
God
tell
or
you,
not?
David, there are emotional
Do I
leaps that
believe in God or
you
not?
do. And let
I
me tell you,
do.
you
So
know
I am
why I
actually
know that you
lying
do?
about not believing in God.
I
This is,
think that
do you
deep down,
understand how
yes,
utterly bonkers
because
that
you know
is?
what? You know what? Let me tell you something. The worst thing that people
I'll be
can
honest with you.
do,
I would end this recording right now if it wasn't so revealing. This doesn't help
let
you,
me tell
Teddy.
you, David, when people argue and bicker and have a dialogue, no matter
Uh-huh.
how fiery it is,
Mm-hmm.
and when they're
Mm-hmm.
still engaged,
Mm-hmm.
then there's still something there. Okay.
No,
The worst thing that you can
no,
do,
there's
the
there's
worst thing
nothing
that you can
there.
do,
Okay.
yes, the worst thing that you can do
This
is to just
conversation is
walk
going on
away.
strictly for my entertainment value, and when
Well,
it no longer
good.
fulfills that, I'm gonna cut it.
Okay,
There's
well,
nothing there.
the way that you show somebody that you don't give a damn about them is you just shut them out. That is the way. Yet you, for what, 3 years, are obsessed with talking about God every day. Why? That makes no
Well, it must
sense.
mean
None.
that I
That
believe
is
in
that
God.
is
Just
that is a
just
mental
curious, do you believe that
disorder.
all of the atheists on Skeptics and Seekers who have participated on air and off, that they are also lying about not believing in God? I
Darren
just
grew
want to
up.
know how deep your
Darren grew
crazy
up as an
goes.
atheist, so Darren is outside of that. But
Okay,
I
so
think so many. Okay, let's
anyone who
get
has
down.
left the church, you
Let
think?
us get down to what this is all about, David.
Yes,
Because this is
yes.
what I've always wanted to do, and
Let's
that
get
is to
there.
talk to you. I think that the problem is that people who leave the church, we all can have doubts, but you know what? Mother Teresa had doubts. Now, Saint
Mother
Teresa,
Teresa was
she
a
had
fucking
doubts.
monster.
She was not a fucking monster.
Yes, she was.
She was a good woman. No, she was
She
not.
was an
She
asshat
came.
who, if is
She
burning in the
came
hell that she
from.
believed in, if
She
there's any
came
justice in the
from.
universe.
She came from a wealthy family, and she gave it all up to be in the gutters and
If you have a point to
and
make,
to help
you're going to want
people
to make it
dying.
without Mother Teresa as your
No,
example. So
my point is.
you're
My
suggesting that
point is.
anyone who walks away from the faith is actually angry with God and they believe in
Listen
God
to
and they're
what I'm
lying.
saying.
They're lying when they say they don't.
You
Is that
didn't
what
let
you're
me
saying?
finish. What I'm saying is by
Is
bringing
that
up Mother
correct or
Teresa.
not?
Listen, I wasn't listening to what you were saying because you weren't listening to what I'm trying to get
Well, that's
out.
because
My
you're talking
point,
shit.
my point with Mother
You have
Teresa
already.
is that
I don't
she.
care about your point with Mother Teresa.
Listen, no, it is
You
important.
have accused me of lying about not
I will
believing in
get to
God.
that, and this is directly pertinent to that point.
Don't care.
Mother
Make it
Teresa.
get there without Mother
Listen,
Teresa.
no,
No,
because she's a perfect
I
example of what I'm
sorry,
trying to
won't
show.
don't
No,
care.
David,
Don't care.
she had
Don't
doubts.
care.
You should
Could care
care
less.
because I am
Gonna keep
distinguishing
talking over you
honest doubt.
until you move on.
I am distinguishing honest doubt from doubt that comes from a sense of wanting liberation from what God's dictates are. Mother
Okay,
Teresa
so how
had.
you I don't know look, you
Mother
mentioned Mother
Teresa
Teresa one
harbored.
more time, okay?
Look, listen, David. She
I'm giving
harbored
you fair
doubts for
warning,
many
okay?
years because you can't handle the truth.
I'm taking any truth you
Are
want
you
to
going to
throw
take your
out,
ball and go
except that you're going
home?
to have to move past Mother
Are you going to?
Teresa.
Apparently, you don't view conversation as blood sport, do
So
you?
so do you
David?
have a point?
You're going to tell
Make
me
it.
what I can say, or you're going to stick it out like a man and have the conversation and not duck out?
I'm not going to let you continue to hide behind straw men. If you have a
It's not a
point,
straw man. You won't even let me get my point out in
well,
full.
I've told you you're going to have to move past Mother Teresa. I
No,
don't. Okay.
that's what people do that can't handle the
So if
argument.
you can't
That's
make your
as good as
point
an ad
without talking
hominem
about Mother
for people
Teresa,
that
we're
lose
done.
arguments. That is what happens when people
If you
cannot
can't
handle their
make your
own in an
point
argument.
without talking about Mother Teresa,
No, because she
we're
is a perfect example of it. Now
okay.
let me get my
We're
point
done.
out. Then we are done, and you can't handle